God sees the truth but waits. In the town of Vladimir, many years ago, there lived a merchant named Ivan Dmitrich Aksionov, a man still young, cheerful, handsome, and good natured, with fair hair and a ruddy face. Known for his fondness of music, laughter, and gatherings in his early years, though after marrying he became more steady, industrious, and thoughtful, devoting himself to his shop, his family, and the quiet joys of domestic life. And although he still enjoyed a glass of wine on occasion, he was widely respected by all for his honesty and generosity, so that everyone in town trusted him. One summer, when the great fair was to be held in the distant village of Nizhny Novgorod, Ivan prepared to travel, packing his goods and bidding farewell to his wife and children, who clung to him with affection, though his wife urged him to stay, for she had dreamed a troubling dream that night before, in which she saw him return home with grey hair, a sign she feared meant sorrow. Yet Ivan only laughed and kissed her, saying that dreams were nothing but foolish vision of the night. And so he mounted his horse and set off in good spirits, eager to sell his wares and enjoy the bustle of the fair. Along the road, he met another merchant whom he knew well, and together they decided to spend the night at a roadside inn, where they ate supper, drank tea, and sang songs until the lamps burnt low, after which each retired to his own chamber. Ivan lying down in peace and rising early the next morning before dawn to continue his journey, bidding farewell to the innkeeper and setting off once more on the wide, dusty road. But scarcely had he gone a few miles when a party of soldiers overtook him and demanded to know who he was and where he came from. And when they asked about the merchant with whom he had lodged, they told him grimly that the man had been found murdered in the night, his throat cut, his purse stolen, and when they searched Ivan's bags, they discovered, to his horror, a bloody knife wrapped in his belongings. Though Ivan swore before God and men that the knife was not his, that he had never seen it, that he had left the inn before sunrise and knew nothing of the crime. Yet his protests fell on deaf ears, for the circumstantial evidence was too strong, and he was seized, bound, and taken back to the town for trial at the court. Witnesses spoke. The innkeeper testified that Ivan had left early, yet suspicion clung to him like a shadow, and the judge, frowning gravely, condemned him as guilty of murder and robbery, sentencing him to be flogged and then sent in chains to Siberia for penal servitude. And when his wife came to him in prison, carrying their little children, she threw herself at the judge's feet, pleading for mercy, insisting on his innocence, but the sentence stood unmoved, and when she came to Ivan himself, she spoke with tears. My dearest husband, tell me the truth. Did you commit this crime? And though he swore to her with all his heart that he was innocent, the doubt in her eyes pierced him deeper than the lash of whip, for she too seemed unstained, and so Ivan, flogged until his back was raw and bleeding, was chained with other convicts and marched in irons across the endless plains of Siberia. Far from home, far from justice, far from all that he had loved, there in frozen wilderness he labored with thieves, murderers, and felons, cutting timber, hauling loads, digging earth, enduring hunger and cold, sleeping on hard boards in crowded huts that reeked of sweat and misery. And as the years rolled by, his hair grew grey, his once ruddy face became gaunt and lined, and the luster of his youth faded, replaced by silence and a solemn gentleness, for in the long nights of suffering he turned more and more to God, finding comfort in prayer, in the reading of the scripture, and in the thought that though men might condemn him falsely, God saw all, and though he waited, his truth would one day be revealed. Gradually, the other convicts began to respect him, calling him grandfather or the saint. For he quarrelled with no one, spoke kindly to all, helped the sick, shared what little bread he had, and bore his hardships with patience, never cursing his fate, though deep within his soul he carried a wound that never healed. The thought of his lost family, his ruined name, his stolen life, and the unanswered question of why God had allowed such injustice. Yet he endured, repeating always in his heart the words, God sees the truth but waits. And so many years went by, 2 decades and more, until one day a new prisoner was brought to the camp. An old man with grey hair and a cruel face, hardened by crime and punishment, whose fierce eyes still burned with pride. And as the convicts gathered around to hear the newcomer's tales of robbery and deceit, Ivan listened quietly and soon perceived from certain details of a story that this was none other than the man who long ago at the inn had murdered the merchant and cunningly placed the bloody knife among Ivan's things to shift the blame. And a storm rose in Ivan's heart, for at last here was the guilty man living freely all those years, while he himself had wasted away in chains. And his first denounce himself before the gods and demand justice, but he restrained himself, saying nothing, though in his heart the struggle raged between anger and forgiveness. And it happened one night when the prisoners lay asleep that this man, whose name was Makar, confessed his guilt, for he had seen Ivan's gentleness and was troubled in his conscience. And so he crept to Ivan, fell on his knees, and whispered with tears, Ivan Dmitrich, forgive me. It was I who killed the merchant and put the knife among your things. I am guilty. You have suffered for my crime these 26 years. Forgive me, for I can't bear the weight of it. And Ivan, looking upon him, felt at first the hot surge of hatred, the desire to curse him and strike him down. But then, as he gazed into the broken face of the man who had ruined him, a great peace descended into his soul, and he said softly, It's not for me to forgive you, but may God forgive you, for he alone is the judge. And from that hour a burden lifted from his heart, and he felt a lightness, a readiness for death, no longer longing for release, no longer fearing the injustice of men, but seeing only the mercy of God. And not for long after this, word came from the authorities that Ivan Dmitrich Aksionov had been found innocent, that the true criminal had confessed, that he was to be pardoned and freed, restored to his home, his honor, and his name. And the governor himself came to tell him the news, saying, You will soon be released and turn to your family. But Ivan only smiled, for already he felt another freedom approaching, a great release than any governor could grant. And that very night he fell ill, lay down upon his hard prison bed, and quietly gave up his soul to God, dying not in shame but in truth. And when the convicts saw that he was dead, they stood in silence, crossing themselves and whispering prayers, for they knew he had been righteous. And thus it was shown once again that God sees the truth but waits. And though men may be deceived, though justice may be delayed for years of even lifetime, in the end the soul that endures with patience will find peace, and the guilty will not escape the judgment that belongs to the Lord alone. Thank you. Amira lived in a small village tucked between rolling hills and winding rivers. Every morning she walked past the old oak tree at the village edge, its roots gnarled and deep, thinking about the life she wanted but never dared to pursue. Her parents ran a modest bakery, and Amiral had always been expected to inherit it, kneading dough and serving bread to neighbors who knew her since childhood. One afternoon, a traveling artist arrived in the village. His name was Elias, and he painted scenes that seemed alive, rivers that sparkled, skies that whispered secrets, and flowers that leaned towards unseen. Amira was mesmerized by his work. She lingered at his stall for hours, asking questions, marveling at the colors that seemed to leap off the canvas. You have a keen eye, Elias said, noticing her fascination. You see the world not as it is, but as it could be. Those words lingered long after he left. Amira started painting in secret, at night when the bakery was quiet and her family asleep. At first, her strokes were clumsy, her colors muddied, but day by day she improved, pouring her longings and dreams into each brushstroke. Her paintings became windows to possibilities she had never considered for herself. Months later, a traveling fair came to the village. Amira hesitated but displayed her work alongside local crafts. To her surprise, visitors were enchanted. One painting, a simple depiction of the village at dawn, was purchased by a gallery owner for the city. He offered to show her work in an exhibition. Amira felt a swirl of fear and excitement. Leaving the bakery meant leaving her parents' expectations behind. Yet she realized that the life she had feared pursuing was calling her in whispers stronger than any duty. On the morning she was to leave, she walked past the old oak tree one last time. Its roots seemed to welcome her, not bind her. She whispered a promise to herself to live fully, to embrace the unknown, and to honor her own dreams. Years later, Amira's paintings were admired in cities far beyond her village. Yet she never forgot the oak tree, the quiet encouragement of a stranger's words, and the courage it took to see the world not as it was, but as it could be. The lesson she carried was simple. Sometimes honoring the expectations of others is easy, but honoring the calling within is what truly makes life meaningful.